Jai Mata Di, Jai Ganga Ma. I'm sitting here next to the Ganga. It's a beautiful morning. Nice breeze today. Beautiful blue skies. And I just wanted to welcome you again to this group. A few new people have joined from Frame Drum Academy, and I'm very pleased that we can learn this frame drum Kirtan together. Because, and this is what I wanted to have a conversation about right now, Kirtan, I just want to explain what is Kirtan. And people see Kirtan in the context of Western Kirtan, in the West, in America and Europe, and think that that's Kirtan, and it has something similar to probably the original Kirtan. But a lot of it is, let's say, modernized versions, whether it's the melodies they're using, the instruments they're using, the way they're performing it, and their own devotion. It's like Kirtan is part of Bhakti Yoga. It's part of the path of devotion. And if you don't have your own devotion to something, then that your expression of Kirtan is going to be different. It'll probably take more of the form of a concert, a performance, a musical experience. And originally it was either performed in temples, in congregation, or there were a lot of, particularly about 500 years ago, it became modernized in the Indian sense, that many devotional, you can call them saints, I guess. They were all saints because in the end they'd renounced everything and they just chanted the name of God. And so there were many bhakta sants, particularly in Maharashtra and in other states of India, and they just roamed around chanting and speaking poetry and singing that poetry, and often they were from low caste, so they weren't even allowed into the Vedic temples. So they just did their own thing, and they reached the masses because they could give that message and sing those songs and that poetry in the local language. So that really revived, let's say, it was a renaissance of this Kirtan movement. And so the modern Hare Krishna movement sort of stems from that 500 years ago, let's say, and that came to the West, last century, and Kirtan, I guess, took off from there. So many people know Kirtan as being Hare Krishna because they're the ones who really propagated, going around chanting their devotional Maha Mantra to their form of God and their understanding of that divine personality. So the point with Bhakti is that you actually connect with your own personal form of God, and that's what gives you this intimate connection, and that's what makes you really open up your heart and feel it, because it's your way of expressing your praise for your form of God. And so it really in the end doesn't matter what that God is. It can be the 5 elements, nature, it can be Jesus, it can be Krishna, it can be Buddha, it can be Guru Nanak, it can be any of the saints, it can be your guru, it can be so many things. It's what you put your full faith into and what you believe is going to take you out of your limitations, which is what we're all trying to do. And yoga is the path to transcend this conditioned mind and the egoic identity and become divine. So it's like your vision of what that divine principle, that divine power is, that's what you're calling to, that's what you're invoking, and that's what you're wanting to embody, and that's what will transform you on the inside. So just going back to Kirtan, there's a a text which talks about devotion, the different forms of devotion, and I think there's 9 of them, and it starts with listening, Shravanam. The next one is Kirtanam, which is praising or using your voice and your expression to call out and praise and speak the stories, and then it goes into worship and service and surrender and all these other forms of devotion that perhaps go more deeply within. So it starts with listening, and Kirtan as a practice, or in fact I would say any yoga practice, really does start with listening. And in the Kirtan, it's like listening to your own heart, connecting in with your own heart. And this is where the drum actually can help you. And if you actually go back, say 500 years or further than that, when these devotional practices were much more prolific and traditional in India and other countries, in India, I would say there was no such thing as the harmonium, because that came in with the colonial takeovers, in the last 200 or 300 years. The harmonium came in as a sort of Christian organ event that the Indians liked, and they took on, and they adapted it to their own style, to sit on the ground and just use one hand and not need anything to be able to sing. But the thing is, the harmonium is actually following the Western musical system, the notation, a tempered system, which isn't actually the same frequency combination as you get from natural string instruments like the sitar and other instruments, violin, that you can find these real harmonics, the harmonics that you get when you use your voice. And this is what the Indian tradition is. The music is based in these harmonics. So the harmonium is great if you just have a drone on the sa and the pa, like the perfect fifth. Then you have the harmonics can come. Otherwise, the melodies are, it's difficult to tap into the original system of ragas, which Indian music is based on, the raga. And the raga creates the mood, and it's these exact micro intervals that create the mood and the combination and how you bring them together. So it's a very intricate and subtle system that they developed over thousands of years. So Western Kirtan, by definition, by being based on Western instruments and Western melodies and Western everything, is of course a mutation of the original system. So the original bhaktas, these bhakti saints and poets and singers who were just roaming the streets in their devotion and spreading the message, they had usually a small, they call it ektar, a one-stringed instrument that they would play. You can press the thing to vary the notes a little bit, press the frame that's holding the string together, and it changes the notes, but basically it's a rhythmic instrument, and the ektar would give that drone and give that rhythmic foundation. And of course they had kartal or some chimes and bells and things like that, probably around their feet as they were walking, and a stick that they were walking with that they were probably tapping, and a small drum. Sometimes they had a small drum tied to their waist, and they have the ektar giving the drone and the form of rhythm, and the drum, and that they just walked around the world singing and doing kirtan. So I think the frame drum is an excellent way to come back to those origins of kirtan, and so that's why I'm excited that we do this. And I'm no expert in the whole drumming thing and rhythms, so I'm just exploring rhythms that seem to work with some mantras and putting out my suggestions. But of course I'm inviting you all to discover your own way of doing this. And so right now I'm sharing what I know, and as we progress we can all share what we're discovering here. So I just wanted to bring this up because people think, oh, you have to have a harmonium to do kirtan, and I want to say that the tradition, they weren't lugging around a harmonium, and they weren't doing Western notation and Western music systems. They were singing ragas, and these ragas are moods, and they come from inside. Of course, now it's a system that gets passed on from maestro to student and everything, but these ragas, they're moods that actually come. When you're in a certain mood, your vocal expression will change. When you're in another mood, your vocal expression will change to that. And this is what it's about. It's about really tapping in, shravanam, listening to your own heart and listening to that language, that divine language that's arising from within you and wants to express itself. And that's what ends up being kirtan. So listening and then giving, and listening to others and then giving, and listening to yourself and listening to the divine, and listening to the drum, listening to your own heartbeat, listening to your breath. The breath is one of the most important things when we're singing. So the breath cycles, your heartbeat and your breath cycles. And then, of course, we have the whole seasonal cycles, all the cycles there that affect our mood and affect our life. And if we can really tap into that, and before I end, I just want to mention that the word svara in Sanskrit means tone or note, but it also means many things. It has, it's like a vowel sound, an open sound, the note. And it also is like our own note, our own inner vibration is swara. So there's the outer expression and there's the inner swara. So everyone has their own unique vibration, their own unique personality and their own frequency. And that's why we connect with some people, because we resonate together. And that's what this resonance is about. So swara. And there's also a form of yoga which many people don't know about called Svara Yoga. And this is tapping in to the cycles of our breath, because there's a whole science behind it. It's quite fascinating. And if we can tap into the cycles of our breath, because it actually changes dominance from left to right side every hour or 2 hours. And so this changes also the patterns of our body, when we should be eating, when we should be sleeping. And if we can tap into that and tune in to the cosmic swara, which is the night and day, the seasons, the times, whether there's sun or rain, this is the cosmic swara, the sound of the universe as it is in playing out in this manifestation. And if we, as part of that manifestation, tap into that cosmic swara with our own individual swara and combine, tune in and entrain with that, that's the ultimate entrainment. That's the ultimate listening, and that's the ultimate connection. So kirtan scratches the surface, and it's a way in. It's a portal. It's a way in. It's a way into hearing the sound of your emotions, hearing what's going on within you, feeling into your own cycles and rhythms and needs and values and your own truth, basically, and expressing that. And I have to say, when you start on this path of bhakti yoga and you start to express yourself and open up these channels and allow the divine sound of your voice to emerge and start to learn how to temper that with the heart, truth will emerge in you. There's no question of that. It's part of the process. And if we can speak our own truth in kindness, in compassion, and in understanding for the trauma that everyone else is going through around us, then we are really tapping into our own truth and our own heart and our own connection to this whole universe and every being in this universe. So, small message from Ganga Ma, and I'm sending you blessings from Ganga. Hara Hara Gange, Hara Hara Gange. Ganga Ma is the source of wisdom. It is that flow of divine understanding, and we can see it here when we're at the river in some manifested form. But this is the divine flow of Ganga that is showing us the truth of this reality. So, Hara Hara Gange, Jai Ma. Coming to say goodbye.